Hey everyone, Elizabeth here. The Last Laugh delivers stories that leave you speechless. If you're here for it, hit subscribe and let's go.
My name is Naomi Colbrook. I am 38 years old, and until 2 years ago, my family considered me the most embarrassing person they knew. I want to tell you the truth about that. Not the version that makes me look righteous from the start, but the actual truth. Because the real story is harder than that, and it matters that you hear the harder version. I was late to everything they valued. My younger sister Danielle got married at 26 to a man named Patrick who wore cufflinks to dinner and whose parents owned a dental practice in Buckhead. She had a baby on the way by 28. She bought a house in a neighborhood with a HOA newsletter. My parents attended every milestone with corsages and photo albums and tears of joy. I, meanwhile, had a daughter at 31 without a husband, was running a non-profit workforce development organization that I had co-founded 3 years earlier, and drove a 2017 Subaru with a cracked rear bumper that I kept meaning to get fixed and never did. I was also, quietly, in the middle of building something much larger than the nonprofit. A public-private partnership model for workforce reentry that had begun attracting state-level funding and the attention of people whose names I was not yet allowed to share publicly. My family did not know that second part. They knew the Subaru. They knew I worked long hours for nonprofit pay. They knew I had a daughter named Iris, their grandchild, their niece, who was bright and loud and asked too many questions at dinners and had once spilled cranberry juice on Danielle's cream-colored tablecloth at Christmas. They had catalogued my life into a story about a woman who had made questionable choices and never quite recovered from them. That story was not true. But I had stopped correcting it. I had stopped correcting it for a specific reason, and that reason had a name. Marcus Webb. Marcus was my program director at Caldwell Osei Workforce Initiative, CWI we called it. And he had been with me since the first year when we were operating out of a rented conference room at a church in Vine City. He had watched me pitch county commissioners in borrowed blazers and eat granola bars for lunch because I couldn't expense a real meal. He was also the person who first told me that the calls I was getting from the governor's office were not routine courtesy outreach. "They're studying your reentry model," he told me in October, 18 months before any of this happened. "They want to scale it statewide." I had looked at him across our actual office by then. We had real offices in a converted building off Edgewood, and said, "How confident are you?" "Confident enough that I think you should stop telling your mother you work at a nonprofit." I had laughed. But I had also understood what he meant. What was coming, if it came, would change the scope of what CWI was. Not just the organization. My legal classification. My title. The number of people who would know my name without me ever introducing myself. And I had made a decision then that I have since turned over many times in my mind. I decided not to tell my family anything until there was something definitive to tell. Part of that was practical. State-level negotiations are fragile. I had seen other nonprofit founders announce partnerships that fell apart before ink was dry, and the professional embarrassment of that was significant. I did not want to be caught between a quiet failure and a family that would treat that failure as confirmation of everything they already believed. But I will be honest about the other part. The other part was hurt. I had been quietly absorbing dismissal from my family for years, and I had grown tired of the mental effort it took to translate my actual life into terms they would credit. I had stopped trying. I had retreated into my work and my daughter and my small apartment with the good light, and I had let them keep their version of me. That was my share of the cost of what happened. I'm not pretending otherwise. Iris was 3 when my mother started calling her complicated. This was her word for a child who had opinions. Iris had very clear opinions about her shoes, about whether she wanted orange juice or apple juice, about which parent, mine or my sister's, should get to sit next to grandma at Sunday dinner. She had inherited, apparently, my tendency to think that her perspective was worth expressing. My mother found this charming in Danielle's son, Cooper. In Iris, she described it with a slightly pinched expression and the word complicated. I noticed this. I did not say anything about it to my mother. But I noticed it the way you notice a bruise forming, slowly and then all at once. Iris's father, Kevin, was not in the picture in any meaningful way. He was in Savannah with a new partner and paid child support reliably, which I considered the best possible version of how that situation could have gone. Iris did not ask about him much yet. She had Marcus, who called her the future CO, and brought her colored pencils when he came to the office on weekends, And she had my best friend Tamara, who had been there when Iris was born and who showed up on Tuesday nights sometimes just to put Iris to bed so I could finish work without guilt. Tamara was a doctor, an ER attending at Grady, and she and I had been friends since college. She knew about the state negotiations. She was one of 4 people who knew. She used to look at me sometimes when I mentioned my family and say, "You know this isn't going to last forever, right?" I always said, "I know." I did not always believe it. The state partnership was finalized in February. Not a grant. A formal public-private infrastructure agreement, the kind that creates budget line items and advisory board appointments and press releases from the governor's communications team. CWI would be the cornerstone implementation partner for a statewide workforce reentry initiative serving returning citizens across 14 counties. The budget over 5 years was substantial. My role would be formalized as executive director with an expanded mandate that included policy advising. The governor's office wanted to announce at the Women in Leadership Gala, which was held every spring at a downtown hotel. They wanted me as the keynote recipient. They asked whether I had a preference for who would present the award. I said the governor himself would be appropriate if he was willing. He was. I told Marcus. I told Tamara. I told my accountant, because the tax implications required immediate attention. I did not tell my parents. I did not tell Danielle. I want to be careful here about why, because it is easy to make this sound like strategy, like I was positioning myself for some satisfying moment of revelation. That was not it, or at least not all of it. I had simply spent so long living my actual life in a separate compartment from my family's version of my life that opening the compartment felt like a more significant act than I knew how to perform alone, in a phone call in advance of anything. I kept thinking, when there is something to show them, I will show them. When it is real and visible and undeniable, the conversation will be different. I was right about that. I was not right about how it would feel. Danielle's baby shower was scheduled for the last Saturday in April. The gala was the Friday before it. I had known about both dates for weeks. I had not connected them aloud to anyone in my family because I did not think it would matter. I was planning to attend the shower. I had already purchased a gift, a handmade wooden name puzzle from a craftsperson I'd found at the Sweet Auburn Market, and a set of soft blankets in yellow and white that Danielle had mentioned wanting in a text thread I was technically still part of. My father called on a Wednesday. He did not begin with a question. He began with a statement, which was his way when he had already decided something. "Your sister's shower is this weekend," he said. "I want to give you a heads up that it's going to be a smaller thing. More intimate." I said, "I know. I have a gift already." There was a pause. "The thing is," he said, "Danielle feels like, and I think she has a point, that sometimes when you come to things it becomes about you." I was standing in the parking lot of my office building. It was a warm afternoon. A starling was doing something on the edge of the curb. I watched it. "About me," I said. "You have a big personality. Iris has a big personality. And Danielle just wants this one thing, to feel calm. Patrick's mother is coming in from Charlotte and she has a certain way about her. And your sister just wants it to feel calm," I said. "Right." My mother got on the line then. She must have been sitting nearby. "Naomi, we love you. Just this once, let your sister have her day." I said nothing for a moment. I was thinking about the gift I had already bought. I was thinking about the last 6 family events I had attended and searching them for the moment I had made things about myself. I found a few things. A comment I had made at Christmas about a policy issue that had led to a longer conversation than anyone wanted. A moment at Cooper's birthday party when Iris had cried and I had left the room to handle it, and somehow that had registered as disruption. These were real things. They were also not what my family was describing. "I understand," I said. "Thank you, sweetheart," my mother said. I hung up. I stood in the parking lot. The starling was gone. I went inside and told Marcus I would need him at the gala venue by 4 on Friday for a walkthrough because I wanted to know exactly where we would be standing when my name was called, and I wanted to know where Iris would be sitting, and I wanted both of those things handled in advance so that I could be fully present for all of it without managing logistics in real time. He looked at me for a moment. "You okay?" "I'm going to be," I said. "I need to tell you something about my sister before I tell you what happened at the gala. Danielle is 2 years younger than me. When we were children, she was the one who wanted to be near me. She followed me around our grandmother's house in Columbus. She came into my room at night when she had bad dreams. We were not always at odds. There was a version of us, younger before the world started sorting us into categories of success and failure, that was genuinely close. I think about that version of us sometimes. I think about how you can love someone and still be trained over years by a family's collective story about each of you, to treat them the way the story says you should. Danielle had been told she was the daughter who did things right. I had been told, not in words, but in 100 small calibrations of attention and approval, that I was the daughter who complicated things. We both internalized those roles far more completely than either of us ever chose to. I don't think Danielle is a bad person. I think she was scared of Patrick's mother and looking for a way to manage that fear, and I was the most convenient variable she could control. I think my father agreed because agreeing with Danielle had been his default setting for years. I think my mother meant the love she expressed even when the love came wrapped around a dismissal. I think none of that excuses it, and I think all of it is true at the same time. The gala was on a Friday evening at the Waldorf downtown. I wore an emerald blazer over ivory silk because Tamara had said the green was the color of someone who had already won, and I had believed her. Iris was in a gold dress that she had selected herself and refused to negotiate on. She was 4 by then, and her opinions about clothing had only intensified. Tamara came with us. She sat at our table with Marcus and 2 members of our board, and she held Iris during the program and let her eat the fancy shortbread cookies and whispered to her about which people in the room had important jobs, which Iris received as a kind of game. The governor arrived with his communications director and 2 members of his policy staff. I had met him before, twice in working meetings, but this was the first time we had been in the same room socially. He was taller than I remembered. He shook my hand and said, "I've been looking forward to this all week," and I believed him because nothing in his tone suggested performance. During the cocktail reception before the program, he crouched down to eye level with Iris and said, "And who are you?" Iris told him her full name, her age, her preferred color, and the fact that she had a fish named Gerald who had recently died. The governor said, "Gerald sounds like he was an important fish." Iris said, "He was medium important." He laughed. A real laugh, not a political one. Then he looked up at me and said, "Would she be comfortable if I held her for a photo? My communications team is going to want documentation of all of this." I looked at Iris. Iris considered the question with great seriousness and then opened her arms. The photograph that resulted, the governor holding my daughter, both of them looking at something off camera and laughing, was taken by his photographer and by 3 different news cameras that were there covering the gala. It ran on the local news that night as part of a 30-second segment on the event. The segment aired at 6:15. Danielle's baby shower started at 6. I was at the podium when my phone, silenced in my blazer pocket, began to buzz in a continuous rhythm that I had learned to associate with a volume of incoming messages too large to be casual. I noted it. I finished my remarks. I accepted the award, a crystal piece and a framed certificate that announced the CWI state partnership in formal language. I thanked the governor. I thanked Marcus and my board. I said Iris's name because she was in the room and she deserved to hear it. Then I stepped back from the podium and the governor stepped forward and said something about the importance of centering community-built solutions in state policy, and I stood beside him and the cameras were on us and I did not yet know what was happening across town. Tamara told me later in the car while Iris slept in her car seat. "Your family has been calling you," she said. "I know. Do you want to know what happened?" I did. And I didn't. Both of those things at the same time. "Tell me," I said. She had gotten a text from a number she didn't recognize, later traced to Patrick's sister who apparently had Tamara's number from a mutual contact. The text said only, "Is that really Naomi on Channel 11? At the shower, apparently someone had turned on the television in the background. The venue had a TV mounted near the bar and it had been on for ambient noise. The 6 o'clock news had moved into a segment on the gala. The anchor had said my name. The screen had shown me at the podium. Then it had shown the photo. Me beside the governor, Iris in his arms, all of us laughing at something Gerald related. The anchor had described me as executive director and founder of the Caldwell Osei Workforce Initiative, the cornerstone of the governor's new statewide workforce reentry program. Patrick's mother had said, according to Tamara's source, "Is that your sister?" Danielle had not answered immediately. My mother had apparently looked at my father. My father had apparently looked at the television for a very long time. And then Danielle had started screaming. Not in anger, not exactly, but in the specific register of someone whose entire understood version of reality has just been dismantled in front of an audience she was trying to impress. The scream that comes when the story you have been telling collapses faster than you can catch it. I did not go to the shower. I went home. I gave Iris a bath and put her to bed, and she fell asleep holding the small velvet bag they had given her at the gala with a child's activity kit inside. I sat in the kitchen for a while with a cup of tea I did not drink. My father called at 9:43. I let it go to voicemail. This was not strategy. I was genuinely not ready. He called again at 10:15. I answered. There was a long pause on his end. Then he said, "Why didn't you tell us?" I thought about all the ways I could answer that question. I thought about the parking lot, the starling, the word calm. I thought about the gift I had bought that was still sitting wrapped on my kitchen counter because I had not been to the shower to give it. I thought about every Sunday dinner where I had translated my work into terms small enough to fit inside their understanding, and how eventually I had stopped translating. I tried, I said. For a long time I tried. He was quiet. You called me 2 days ago, I said, to tell me that my presence would make things awkward. That's the most recent conversation we had about my life. Naomi. I'm not angry, Dad. This was partially true. I'm tired. There's a difference. He did not say he was sorry. Not that night. He said, your mother wants to talk. I said I would call tomorrow. He said okay. We hung up. I sat with the quiet for a while. It did not feel like triumph. I want to be clear about that. It felt like the particular exhaustion of having been right about something you wish you'd been wrong about. The formal confrontation happened on Sunday. My parents came to my apartment. I had not invited them, but I had not told them not to come, which in my family amounted to an invitation. Danielle came too without Patrick, which surprised me. She had Iris's gift from the shower tucked under her arm. A stuffed rabbit that Iris would later name, the important one, and carry everywhere for the next 2 years. We sat in my living room. Iris, sensing the weight of the room the way children always do, went to her bedroom and began a very elaborate game involving her stuffed animals that required her to narrate it at full volume. The sound of her came through the walls the whole time we talked. My mother started with the thing she had been rehearsing. I could tell it was rehearsed because it was more organized than her usual speech. We didn't know, she said. We didn't understand the scope of what you were doing. We should have asked more questions. You did ask, I said. I told you I ran a nonprofit workforce program. That was true. You left things out. Yes. My father said, you let us believe. I let you believe what you already wanted to believe, I said. Those aren't the same thing. Danielle had not spoken. She was sitting on the edge of my couch with her hands on her stomach. She was visibly pregnant now, and she was looking at the floor. When she finally looked up, her eyes were red and she said, I didn't know Patrick's mother was going to be like that. About you. I just wanted to. She stopped. You wanted one event that felt smooth, I said. Yes. And I was the variable you could remove. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. I looked at all three of them. I thought about what I wanted from this moment, and I found that what I wanted was not an apology so much as an acknowledgement. Not the formal managed kind, but the real kind. The kind that costs something. I need you to know something, I said. Not to make you feel bad. Because if we are going to find a way to do this differently, you have to know it. I paused. Iris knows. She's 4 years old and she already knows that in this family she is complicated, and her cousin is spirited. She doesn't have words for what that means yet, but she will. And when she does, I need her to know that I saw it and I named it and I did not pretend it was nothing. My mother put her hand over her mouth. That's what I need, I said. That's where we start if we start. The room was quiet except for Iris, who was explaining to her stuffed animals at some length about the importance of honesty. The consequences that followed were not cinematic. There was no single scene where everything was resolved. That is not how it works. Patrick's mother left the shower early, and word circulated through Danielle's social circle with remarkable speed about who I was and what I did and whose arms Iris had been in on the 6 o'clock news. Danielle received several messages in the following week from people who had been at the shower asking questions she didn't know how to answer. That was its own private humiliation, and I did not enjoy it, which surprised me a little. My father, over the following months, began calling me on a different frequency, Not the check-in calls he'd always made, obligatory and brief, but longer calls, sometimes about nothing in particular, the way people call when they are trying to rebuild something without knowing exactly how. He started asking about my work in more specific terms. He started listening to the answers. My mother took longer. She is not someone who processes things quickly, and I had given her a great deal to process. But she started showing up. At Iris's school events, at things I mentioned in passing. Showing up without being asked. Danielle and I are not where we were when we were children. I do not think we will be, not exactly. But we are somewhere. She calls me sometimes to ask about things, small things, and I answer. The stuffed rabbit Iris, named the important one, sits on her bed to this day. That is something. The state partnership launched publicly in September. There was a press event and a ribbon cutting at our new satellite office in Augusta. And the governor gave a speech that quoted something I had written in our original program design documents. I stood beside him and thought about the rented conference room at the church in Vine City, and the granola bars, and Marcus telling me the calls from the governor's office were not routine. Marcus stood just off to my left at the ribbon cutting. Tamara was there too because she had taken the afternoon off and driven 2 hours, and I had told her she did not have to do that, and she had said correctly that I was not in a position to tell her what she had to do. Iris was there. She wore the gold dress again by her own insistence. And she held the oversized scissors they use for ribbon cuttings and took her role in the ceremony with complete seriousness. Afterward, a photographer from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution asked if she could take a photo of just Iris holding the scissors in front of the new sign. Iris said yes. When I saw the photo later, my daughter, 4 years old in a gold dress, holding oversized scissors in front of a sign with my name on it, I had to sit down for a moment. Not because it was triumphant, because it was real. Because all of it was real, the long invisible years in the parking lot and the Wednesday phone call and now this. And it had all happened to actual people, not characters in a story, and the weight of that is not something you put down quickly. I do not know how to describe what it feels like to build something real and have the world confirm it. It is not as clean as I thought it would be. It carries everything that came before it. The victory is genuine, but it is also marked by the years of silence, by what I chose not to say and why, by the version of my daughter who is going to grow up knowing both that her mother was successful and that it cost something to get there. I want her to know both. I think both are worth knowing. There's one more thing. The gift I bought for Danielle's shower, the wooden name puzzle and the yellow blankets. I gave it to her 3 weeks later at a quiet dinner at her house where it was just the two of us, and she had made jollof rice because I had once mentioned in passing years ago that I loved it and I had not expected her to remember. She said as I handed her the package, "I should have just asked you not to bring Iris. That's all I should have asked." I looked at her for a moment. Would you have said why? He thought about it. Probably not. Then it would have been the same conversation eventually. She nodded slowly. I think Patrick's mother is going to be a problem for a long time. Probably, I agreed. I don't know how to handle her. That, I said, is actually something I can help with. He laughed. A real laugh, small and surprised. And I laughed too. The baby when she came was named Clara. Danielle asked me to be there at the hospital. Iris held Clara like she was something irreplaceable. Which is exactly what she was.